name's Corinne McMinnis. I work full-time for the Forestry Commission, but on this particular project I'm gardening for Petra for the Forest Garden, which is a project to do with sustainability.
Right, so here we are today and it's a huge buzz of activity. We've got loads of children around the place. So what's happening?
Petra has invited children from the local Thornton Dale School and also from the Alba Rose retirement home to come and help put some of the spring planting in. And they helped mulch for the winter, where they actually knitted us a lovely blanket which we put in the garden to bed, and it was to help suppress the weeds and also to retain some of the warmth in the soil and some of the moisture. And it worked beautifully along with the additional mulch that was put down as well. In the meantime, there's been quite a lot of planting of the main structure of the garden, which has been the fruit trees that have gone in, which is an under canopy. The canopy being the backdrop of wild trees which we are gardening with, because we're going to have some climbers going up. We've got hops planted against some of the ash trees and the hazel.
Corinne, can we just take one step backwards and just, if you can, I'm sure you can actually, define what a forest garden is, because we might not know.
A forest garden is a garden which is a copy based upon a forest edge. If you were to walk into some of the forests which we've got in Dalby, for example, you would find that actually they're quite dark. There's quite a lot of shade underneath, it's quite deep shade. There's specialist plants that grow underneath there. You'd find quite a bit of fungi, moss, that sort of thing, but not a huge amount that's productive at a pickable level.
Right.
If once you walk to the edge of that forest, you suddenly find that with a greater increase in light, that there's a structure of different layers that appear at a forest edge, and that's essentially what we've got here. We've got the canopy, we've got the under canopy, which is the next layer of trees, which in this garden we've chosen to plant with fruit trees. Under that you've got shrubs. We've got some of the cane fruit, like raspberries. We'll have blackberries as well. You would find those naturally on a forest edge anywhere in Dalby Forest. So we've chosen to copy that here. And then you work your way down the various structural layers until you've filled every single space, horizontal and vertical, that you possibly can with productive plants for human beings.
So productive plants, you mean food, or are you looking wider than that?
Much wider than that. In this particular garden, the thrust has been to look at principally unusual plants for food. So plants which you might have in your own front garden or back garden. You think, oh gosh, that's quite ornamental, but I didn't realise that actually I could eat the berries off that. And that has been what we've tried to plant largely in here, although we've got some of the more conventional ones like plums and cherries in here as well. But yes, principally for food, but as you can see we've got a lot of herbs going in, and many plants are multi-use anyway. We've got medicinal herbs and culinary herbs all going in this morning. The children are helping to plant those. We'll have plants which we will be using for construction as well. We've got a small leaf lime which we intend to keep coppiced for the poles which will be useful in that. We did consider planting bamboo, but it can be quite difficult to control, and we thought we'd get in trouble with planting it so near the stream, which is a valuable habitat in itself. We really didn't want there to be any kind of conflict of ecosystems, if you like.
Right, so just to set where we are, this is just in the courtyard at Dalby Forest, and the obvious reason for it being so is that you're going to create some information points here so that visitors can see.
That's right. We wanted to make the garden as accessible as possible and as educational as possible, so that people would see that what they've already got planted in their window box or on their balcony garden or in their front garden, they would see that they might be able to use that, and they might be able to underplant it with something else that would also be beneficial to them and would enhance their garden and enhance their lives as well.
So is this kind of forest garden, is this something that's actually going to be quite labour intensive to keep up? Or is it going to be
At the moment, at the initial establishment phase, Yes, as you can see, we've got a lot of labour on site. Hopefully this should only happen once, and it's intended that a forest garden is quite low maintenance. That's the whole point of it, really, is that the most of the maintenance is pruning and picking.
Right. So this is actually something that can be replicated if you've got a bit of ground at home and you've got some existing trees. You could just could you perhaps recommend some, if people are thinking about it, to get further information on? Are there any key books or key authors who they could look at to get?
Yeah, the two that I've referred to most have been Martin Crawford and Patrick Whitefield, both of whom have really, really useful books. Patrick Whitefield lays it out, that's the older book and of the two, and it's got the key principles to designing it, laying it out, assessing the site, everything that you'd need to know to establish spacings, that sort of thing. The Martin Crawford book is much more plant specific, so he covers the same design aspects of it as well, more up to date, so the spacings have altered, some of the principles to do with what you might want from around the world where, some of the more current issues to do with climate change are mentioned in there as well and dealt with. But he goes into much more detail about the variety of plants with lovely glossy pictures in as well.
Right. So what's the kind of time span for this now? When's the planting going to be complete? I've got tons of help today, and you're going to make huge progress.
Yes.
So will you finish today, or what's the plan?
Yes, I'm hoping that we'll be finished today.
Right.
The ongoing work that will be involved will be assessing really to see what's surviving and what isn't. With any kind of garden where there isn't somebody on site walking through it every single day, which there isn't with this, there has to be an aspect of loss expected in that, and so I've got to work out what we're losing, why we're losing it, and what we're going to replace it with, and how we're going to replace that as well, cuttings or plant swaps, that sort of thing.
Right.
And that really should be it until we get to the end of an establishment phase, which, speaking from a forestry point of view, is usually about 5 years. And so once you've got beyond that, you're starting to expect a crop to be coming off that.
Right, fantastic. So people will be able to come down and maybe have a go picking their own, visitors?
Of course.
Yes. Because that's the best thing to do, is to be picky and eating it exactly at the same time and enjoying it. Well, that's great. Thank you for setting it in context. We're going to go and meet some of the planters.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Planting plants to copy the outskirts of the forest.
Right. So what kind of plants have you put in? What have you got in there?
Some strawberries.
Okay. And what's the best way to plant these strawberries then? What are you doing? Is there a special technique?
You have to dig and you put it in so it's the right size, and then you just put it all in and then put the straw around it, and then you put the wood chip in. Before you put it in, you need to take the pot out.
Ah, that's really important, isn't it, to take the pot off, isn't it? Otherwise the roots would get all bound up, wouldn't they? Okay, now can you tell me why you think we need to have all these bark chippings? What does that do?
To keep the soil nice and moist.
Ah, stops it drying out. Oh, okay. And now, can you tell me a little something about your school garden?
Well, there's a gardening club, and Matthew goes to the gardening club.
Hello, Matthew. Hello. Say hello to Matthew as well. So what about this gardening club? What do you get up to at your club?
Well, we plant loads of plants, and then we were selling daffodils a few weeks ago.
Were you?
Yep.
What, planting them?
We were selling them, and then people just bought them and they took them home to raise money for some more tools for our garden.
Ah, so can you just give me a description of your garden at school? What kind of things do you find in it?
We put some grapevines in, more strawberries, and some lavender, but they all died out.
Oh, did they? Oh.
And then we got a centre garden, like a massive path of plants around it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there was a wooden walk, and that has loads of plants in. It's wild, very wild. Very wild. It's like a little woodland walk.
Right.
It's got like trees, birds' nests,
I'm going to have to come and visit your school garden. It sounds fantastic.
I'm from Old Stanningford Farm, which is a small holding just north of Ripon, and about 8 years ago, nearly 9 years ago now, I started planting a forest garden at the farm, and I run courses, and Dalby approached me to see if I would do a training course because they were thinking of putting a forest garden into some of their areas. So we did 3 training days, and this is the result of it. We've got some planting done.
Right, so before we start talking about this, can you just tell us about, forest garden? We've had a really good description of what it is.
Yeah.
But there seems to be a sort of real growing interest in it. And what do you put that down to?
I think there's an interest in growing your own food, but also not just planting vegetable patches. A forest garden is more of a permanent structure, and you don't need to do as much work to it once you've got it planted. So that for a lot of people appeals, that you can plant things and then just go and harvest. But also the sustainability of planting perennial plants, so plants that are going to be in the ground all the time, rather than digging the soil all the time and replanting and sowing seeds. It's just a more sustainable way of planting food, and the variety as well, because you can plant all your fruit trees, nut trees, your bushes to get your berries and soft fruit, and then herbs and strawberries and things on the ground. So you're actually utilising a lot of space as well to get a big variety of all sorts of different fruits and vegetables.
So would you say that it's actually more productive on a sort of a per square metre basis than your average allotment?
That is hard to say. There's not been any research done as yet as to the actual yields. But what I would say is you get more variety out of your square patch. So for example, in your vegetable patch, you might plant just carrots. So you'd get a lot of carrots. But in a forest garden, you might have 10, 12, 15 different fruits and vegetables that come out of that same area. And also over a long cropping period as well. So for example, the rhubarb's just starting now in March, and you can have apples up to November, December time. So you've got all the varieties and not just one at one time of the year as well.
Now, so somebody watching this might think, well, yes, but I've only got a tiny patch of garden. I've got a suburban garden. I can't do a forest garden.
Right.
Can I?
You can, yes, yeah. The term forest is a little bit confusing because it's not actually planting a forest as such. It's the principles of planting how a forest or a natural woodland grows. So,
Right.
for example, if you've just got a tree, you can plant lots of things underneath the tree that will grow either in the shade or just on the outsides of the tree. So even if you've got a small back garden and you've got an apple tree in there, you can have half a dozen fruit bushes underneath. You can maybe have something climbing up the tree, like a kiwi fruit, and then strawberries and herbs on the ground. So a small patch can have the principles of a forest garden without actually being a huge, great big forest.
And are there really sort of good benefits in terms of pest control with something like this? Because it's, from what you're describing, it sounds like a much more natural environment.
Yeah, exactly. When you've got lots of different varieties, you have lots of different insects that like being on those particular plants, and the more insects you've got, the less pest you've got, because the insects that like to eat the pest are prevalent. In our forest garden we don't have any pests at all. We've had a survey done, and there were something like 13 different types of bumblebee, 50 different insects, and no damage to any of the fruit and vegetables from the pests, because it's like its own little microclimate, and it just looks after itself.
So, what about the aspects of the work that's involved in keeping it up? I mean, Corinne was saying that she thinks it's pretty low maintenance. Is that something that you found?
Yeah, the hard work is when you first start,
Yeah.
because you've got to get it all planted and get the things planted in the right place. And then there's a bit of maintenance to get things established and growing. But once they're growing, you can leave them to their own devices. However, if you want to put more work into it, you will get more produce. Whereas if you leave a tree, for example, without pruning it, you're not going to get as much fruit from it, but you can spend more time eating the fruit because you're not spending the time doing the maintenance.
Yes, right. That sounds like a good deal.
And all the plants that go into a forest garden are perennials, so they come back year after year, or they will self-seed very easily. So you get natural progression of plants because some will outcompete others as well. So particularly when the trees start growing and cast shade, some of the sun-loving plants may well move out into the sun patches, and then you get more shade-loving plants that come in underneath the trees.
Right.
So it naturally evolves. So it's not a no-maintenance garden, it's a low-maintenance garden.
And
Planting different kinds of plants like raspberry and herbs and strawberries, and because to help the Dalby Forest, to help them plant them so they can grow quickly.
And so you're a member of the gardening club, and you've been there for quite a long time, the gardening club. Why do you like the gardening club so much?
Because it's because then it gives me experience about gardening, and I can help my mum.
When we started, we were asked if we could knit squares to make a carpet to cover the ground. So we had lots of children knitting squares, and then some of them came and saw them being put down onto the ground to suppress the weeds.
I was going to say, so that's to suppress the weed. Do you often come, because you're obviously right on the doorstep of Dalby Forest, do you come here very often and use it?
Not very often. I know some of the children do, because some of the children live in Dalby Forest.
Oh, do they?
That come to the school.
Lucky children. Oh, we're having some watering down there.
This is one here.
Hello.
This is Mark.
Hello, Mark. So you actually live in a forest?
Yeah, I live up the hill, just before you come into the top, the gate where you pay.
Right, and what's it like living in a forest?
It's good fun.
Is it? Yeah. Are you always out and about playing in the forest?
Yeah.
So it's like this is coming back here today, it's like coming home
Yeah.
to work in your huge back garden. Yeah. Wonderful, that's great.
Come on,